give you a little bit of context. I know we talked about Fuse Forum during the orientation, but these are monthly sessions where we are doing specific content for you, knowledge sharing. We're bringing in experts, alums who've done amazing work, and you know what the fellowship is about, and we'll be talking on specific topics that is relevant to you. So please use this as a way to connect not only with our alum who's going to talk, but also with each other, since you are going to be a cohort in here. So with that, I want to introduce, and I think this is going to be a great session here today. I want to introduce our speaker, Norvell Thomas. Welcome, Norvell. Norvell was a fellow in 2021, right? Am I right?
2020 to 2022.
2022, okay.
Yeah, for 2 years.
For 2 years, okay. And so, uh, and let me see, with the Department of Workforce in LA County.
hmm
So Department of Workforce Development, Aging and Community Services. Or is that VDAX? Is that how you
There
say
was
it?
WEDAX, which is
Oh,
no
okay.
longer WEDAX, but yeah.
Okay. All right. So welcome, but I will first of all ask Norval first to maybe introduce yourself a little bit more, just to tell folks what you've been doing after the fellowship, and then over to you for the session. So welcome again, everybody, and a special welcome to Norval.
Hello, everybody. Happy Friday to all of you guys. My name is Norvell. Thank you guys for having me. Hi, Maya, Maria, and Nathaniel. So I really appreciate you guys being here today. I know it's a Friday. I know you're excited to get the weekend started. Today is an opportunity for us to kind of have a nice Fuse Friday to kind of discuss some things that are going on with your project, and also kind of give you some tools and resources that we think would be useful for you as you moving forward with your respective projects. As Jaime mentioned, I did work as a Fuse Fellow alongside Nathaniel. Actually, we were buddies in the same department at WEDAX, and right in the middle of the pandemic. So it was kind of a challenging time. But of course, as Fuse Fellows, we know how to rise to the challenge. And my specific role was doing a lot of organizational development work. So I did a lot of change management, a lot of training and development, and helped hasten the co-creation of two separate departments. A lot of the reports that I was kind of working on, and the county decided that because of the need for more clarity on the different roles, we decided to kind of split those departments up. So it was a really interesting time, the projects that I kind of headed up. So I am going to share with you a little bit about my experience with change management, and specifically how it relates to your projects using a lot of the tools and frameworks that you guys are using, like with the GARE framework and so forth, and involving racial equity. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Okay. And I'm only going to talk for like around 30 minutes, but I would love to really hear from you guys and what your projects are, and how you feel like something like change management can really be of benefit to what you all are doing right here. So we'll definitely leave some time to kind of have like just general discussion. So again, my name is Norvell Thomas, and this is about change management and project leadership with your respective projects. So let me just quickly ask you guys a quick question. First of all, can you see my screen okay? Thumbs up? Awesome. What do you guys think these three things have in common in general? Go ahead and type it out or share, unmute yourself.
Outdated.
They're outdated, yeah, of course. What else?
They record things.
Yeah, actually, yeah, it kind of like captures information. Good. What else?
Communication devices.
Communication devices. Well, not the Polaroid, but I get it. Yeah,
they changed their particular industry.
they did. That's where we're going with this, right? Now, listen, at one time, these were household items. These were probably the best in their field. Polaroid, Palm Pilot, Sony, and they all had commanding market share. But the problem is they were really good, but they didn't keep up with the times. The world is constantly changing, and as such, we've got to be proactive and change with it. So people are expecting different things, including what they want from their government. So what we need to do is kind of be ahead of that change. So the question now is, what conversations are happening right now at the government level, right? We are talking about climate change. We're talking about immigrant rights. We're talking about deportation. We're talking about DEI. We're talking about the backlash to DEI. These things are constantly in flux, and we have got to be ahead of that change and manage change in such a way that we bring the entire organization along with us. So if we could design the functions of government today, what would it look like? What would it feel like? What are the people wanting from our government today? And this is the central question that's being asked of you as a Fuse Fellow. How are you going to help tackle these big, wicked problems? How are we going to solve immigration in a peaceful manner? How are we going to really implement diversity, equity, and inclusion, and not invite the backlash that we've been seeing for the past several years? How do we allow our children to grow up in a diverse and equitable society? What can our government do to help me start my own business? What outreach activities are for small business owners? So these are the functions of government today, which were not like they were 20 years ago, 50 years ago, certainly not 100 years ago. So you're invited to be a Fuse Fellow because you are change agents. Absolutely. Think about the short amount of time that you've been in your respective departments. You probably have thought, wow, these people are lifers, right? They've been here for a long time. The ability for them to change internally is probably pretty limited. They know what they know. There's processes in place and procedures that are very difficult to challenge. So you are brought in to be that change agent. And sometimes it's not the easiest thing to do, but it is absolutely necessary for us to advance the work that we're doing in government. So what is change management? So you guys are all professionals. I'm sure you've seen a lot of different models for change management before, but essentially change management is just a collective term for all approaches to help individuals, teams, and organizations in general make organizational change in some way or another. This includes methods that redirect or redefine the resources, budget allocations, or modes of operation that help change an organization to a particular state. So essentially, you want to move an organization from its current operations to a future organizational state. And you can use that in terms of racial equity. You can look at it from the lens of, employees, manpower, money, machines, methods, things like that. Somehow the organization needs a vast move forward. And so how do we allow that transition to occur? There's 3 different levels in which you can think about change management. So what I like to do is kind of think about it at the individual level, at the project level, and at the systems level. And if you're familiar with the work of change management, you'll see different models for how the change management works. And sometimes they can seem a little bit contradictory. Well, that's because we're trying to use change management in different capacities. When you're trying to change it at the individual level, here we're thinking about 1 or maybe like 5 people, right? You want to provide a flexible but structured approach to help those individuals become aware of the need for change, and then be an active participant in the successful realization of a future state of operations. So that's change management at the really small micro level. Change management at the project level is much more flexible, but it does allow individuals and groups and teams to become aware for the need for change. And so for them to become active participants in the realization of a future state of operations. And then we're thinking about change on a systemic level. This is really like the big multi-year efforts when you're trying to change an entire culture, an entire organization. And from your own experience, that can be very difficult to do. It can easily last 3 to 5 years in a multi-phased approach. So this is where leadership is on board. The entire organization has to, be on board. You're essentially trying to turn around an entire ship. And that takes a lot of resources and it takes a lot of time to do effectively. So that said, there's actually different models for which we can think about how do we change at different levels. So perhaps you've heard of the ADKAR model. This is the most famous change management model. You can get ProSci certified. This is really change management at the micro level. And I am not certified for ProSci, but I'm very well aware of the ADKAR model. I have used this quite a bit in my career. Essentially, ADKAR stands for bringing awareness. You have to have the desire to support the change. the knowledge on how to change, and the ability to change, and then the reinforcement to sustain that change. That's all fine and good, but it doesn't work on different levels. So ADKAR model is great for small and individual change management needs, but we want to go a little bit different. Now, the systems and organizational change level is much bigger. Here we want to look at the culture's DNA, and this is a much longer conversation, which we don't have time for today. But when you're looking at systemic change, you really want to look at the culture and the DNA of an organization. You want to look at the way that people do things, what are their decisions and norms. You want to look at what drives people, what are their motivators and commitments. You want to see what people pay attention to, the information and mindsets, and then you want to see how do people relate to each other. What are the structures and the networks? So you can use this sort of framework to kind of identify change management at the systemic level. But let's go back to where you guys are going to be looking for. You're going to be at the project level on how to really in the team level, how to really use change management at the team level. And here we want to actually apply the GARE methodology, which you guys are all familiar with, to change management for racial equity. So the questions that you may ask yourself right now is, how would you tackle each of these 3 steps to affect real change? First, you need to figure out, okay, how do I normalize conversations about race analysis and what constitutes systemic racism? We've had a lot of backlash from the federal government down to the state government on a lot of the work that we've been doing. People are blasting DEI without even understanding what those terms mean, right? So how do we normalize this conversation about the need for what constitutes systemic racism? And then we got to organize. We got to build the capacity in the organization in partnership with the community. And then we have to operationalize the work. We have to use our data. We have to use frameworks, racial equity frameworks, to design those strategies for equitable outcomes. So that is the GARE model. And I think that it's really useful for us to kind of think about organizational change really on that project level. So what does that mean? What's a framework that we could use at the project level? Well, here's a great step-by-step process that you can use for change management. And it's an 8-step process by John Cotter, and it's very, very good for the work that we're going to be doing. And you'll see how it matches up very, very neatly with the GARE model, right? So it's divided into 3 different phases. You can see here, the first phase, steps 1, 2, and 3, really allow us to first establish a sense of urgency. Hey, we need to figure out, hey, there's some things here that need paying attention to. Don't you agree? Yeah, clearly there's something that we need to kind of do here. From there, step 2, you want to form a coalition. Now, you guys have already been briefed on how to do your stakeholder mapping and identify the power brokers in your organization. This is really, really important because now you want to build that coalition. You can't do this alone. You have to have everybody's buy-in. You have to have their understanding. And building that coalition gives you power and a platform. Step 3 is develop a change vision and a strategy. And in the next several weeks, this is what you're going to be doing, is developing that vision and strategy for your team and for your leaders to say, hey, we are creating the climate for change now. This is all in phase 1. We're creating the climate for the change that we need. Then we're going to go into phase 2, which is enabling the organization. See right there. And that is 4, 5, and 6. So now in phase 2, we actually want to communicate the vision across the entire team. We want to say, hey, this is the vision that we've adopted through our coalition. We've already developed the change vision and the strategy. Now we need to communicate it. We need to operationalize it. Step 5 is to encourage others to act. Hey, get on board here. This is what we're doing. This is going to be great. And here's why. Here's what's in it for you. Here's how it can help our team. Here's how it can help our constituents. And then number 6 in this phase is to help generate those short-term wins. People like to, be a part of successful teams. So whatever those, low-hanging fruits that you can kind of grab and show that you have momentum, that you're actually building upon the change, that's really going to help propel you in your vision forward. The third phase is implementing and sustaining the change. And this is number 7 and 8. You want to sustain that acceleration for the vision. You want to, congratulate people on the success that you've achieved so far. And then you want to really start to institutionalize that change so that it sticks. And so well beyond your tenure in your government agency, it then allows us to really kind of, that work to kind of live beyond your own tenure there. So applying the GARE method to the John Kotter 8-step change management model, the first phase is all about normalization. Here we're going to normalize the work that we're doing. We're going to actually create that climate for change by normalizing the conversations. Then we're going to get busy. We're going to start organizing in phase 2. Again, communicate the vision, empowering broad-based action, and creating those quick wins. That's going to be in phase 2, where we actually organize the work. And then phase 3 is operationalize it. Here we're going to implement the changes, we're going to sustain them, and we're going to build policies and processes in place so that once we leave, the work continues. And that's really the hallmark of a very successful Fuse Fellowship. So you can see how the Garrett model really fits nicely with this project management team-based approach towards change management. And let's kind of like go a little bit more details about what that looks like. So in phase 1, as you guys are really kind of like getting acclimated to your work, you're doing your listening tours, you're talking to folks, you're understanding, hey, this is the issues that we're kind of understanding. This is the normalization phase where we want to establish a sense of urgency. We want to define the need for the change. Why are we here? What is this? What is this about? Why is it urgent? What are the costs for changing? What are the costs for not changing? Who is the target population? These are all questions that you should be asking yourself and your team. And then in phase 2, you want to engage and enable the organization. You want to form that powerful coalition, do your stakeholder mapping, assign roles and responsibilities, identify your change champions. And we have great tools and resources for you how to do stakeholder mapping as well. I'm sure that you guys already have access to a lot of that work. And then phase 3, again, is implementing and sustaining that change, developing that change vision, conducting, again, your stakeholder mappings and things like that, and then implementing a lot of that work. So let's see. Yeah, we already did that for stage 5, engaging and enabling the organization, communicate the vision, empower broad-based action. And then step 6, create those quick wins. And then phase 3, of course, sustaining the acceleration and instituting change. And don't worry, I know this is a lot of information. We're going to leave this information with you, but it's a great resource and a tool where you kind of think about, again, how does this Garrett model work within this change management strategy? Now, Fuse has our own idea framework for change management as well. So this is how we really identify and address inequities. You guys have already seen this before. So how then do we apply this strategic framework to racial equity? Of course, we want to focus on the impact. We have to focus on the impact that we're going to be having. And that's where you're really going to figure out, okay, how are our programs or the services that we're going to be offering going to be impacted by the work that we're doing here? So you always got to focus on the impact on the clients, on the employees, on the community, on the government officials. We all have different stakeholders. What's the impact that's going to have on them? And then D is for disaggregate data, right? So what are your indicators for success? And this is really so critical. So many of us, we come from the world of, corporations and we are very familiar with numbers and metrics. And you'll probably find that a lot of times it's not the case really in government settings. And this is really so important for you to really capture those metrics, capture that data so that you can make an unimpeachable case for why this program or services are needed. You can show in real terms the impact that you're having and how many lives are going to be touched, what this means in terms of overall success. So data is going to be your big friend here. And then E is for engage. You don't exist in a vacuum, of course, and the work that you're doing has to be engaged in community voices and it has to be operationalized amongst the employees. So did those decision makers include any sort of resources and services that were attended? Were BIPOC voices centered in the process, or was it, just at a round table with the leaders in that room? Ask yourself, who's not at this table that needs to be? If not, how can we invite them here? Their voices are super important because I promise you, you're going to be missing a lot. A lot of times change makers think that they have all the answers, and very rarely do they do. The change makers, which you are providing the venues, the platform for other voices to be elevated so that they have buy-in and that you get a diverse perspectives so that you have a really well-rounded view about what's needed and then how that change can be implemented. And then the A, of course, is for accountability. So did you, how much did we do? How well did we do it? is anyone really better off? We make sure that we are held accountable for the work that we did, and will continue to do. So the idea framework, again, is impact, disaggregate data, engage and center community voices, and really holding ourselves accountable. And that's going to be a really good way for you to kind of think about how to employ a lot of the tactics that you're going to be using for change management. Now, there are going to be some roadblocks. There's going to be some forces against you, of course, and typically there are some drivers for change management failure include things like a lack of clarity on strategy and priorities. So often when we're into this work, we have it in our head what kind of needs to happen, but it's not enough to just keep it in our head. We have to clarify what the strategy is, and we have to share this information as much as possible. It may even seem like oversharing, but you have to share and clarify what the strategy is amongst all stakeholders. So they're very, very clear on where they're going, and then very, very clear on how to get there. So make sure that you define early on what the strategic goals are. You have to articulate the goals to each staff member and all those stakeholders. And then sometimes there's just not a commitment to strategy from the leadership. And this happens quite a bit as well. So this is, again, where it's really important for you to kind of identify your change champions. And this is when you do your stakeholder mapping. You have to really identify, hey, in our case, for example, with WEDAX, both Nathaniel and I, we had really good champions in the executive director. He really championed our work, and he made sure that people got on board, even when some of the middle managers didn't really want to have anything to do with us. The executive director really believed in our vision, and he really helped propel a lot of the work forward. So you got to get leadership on board a lot of your work here. Otherwise, it's really going to be doomed to failure. And then a lot of times, the people in the culture are just simply not aligned to the strategy. And this is a difficult because now, for various reasons, maybe they just don't want to, see any changes. They don't feel like there's a need for any sort of change. They like the way that they're doing as it is, or they just don't believe in your vision. So now you have to do a lot of work to kind of really identify who is not on board and how can you get them on board. Make sure that they're aligned with the strategy. And there's different tactics that you can use that would be pretty useful, which we can discuss in our discussion section. But you have to get the people on lock with the work that you're doing. And if it's not, you're going to be really for a difficult road for the next year. And then lastly, there's no incentivization to change. People are saying, okay, that's all fine and good, but why? What's the impact? What's in it for me? And why should I even care? So you have to identify what's good about it for them to change, why it's necessary for them to adopt it, if not necessarily for themselves, for their clients, for the constituents, for the stakeholders. So it's really important for you to identify some of these typical drivers of change management failure and get ahead of those early on so that you're not just stuck holding the bag and at the end of your year saying, well, I tried my best, but I really couldn't get past them. These are some really big barriers that I've encountered a lot over the past 20 years, but something in which you certainly can do your best to kind of mitigate, I think.